Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Snap Tactics with GunnyT. I'm very excited to bring this episode to you today, and we are going to be talking about a very important topic, and that is anxiety, especially when it comes to playing on a ladder and when those stakes are high. It affects me, I know it affects you, and it even affects the top players in the game. The big difference is how we deal with it and how we mitigate how it affects us in our gameplay. So let's break it down and get into this topic today. The inspiration for this video came from the most recent podcast that KM and Brendan had put on with their snapshots. They had Toricon on there, which is a high ladder player. He's been on top of the ladder multiple times. Recently was number one on the ladder, and he's won multiple tournaments. And he was talking about a lot of topics, but one of the topics that really stuck with me was he was talking about anxiety when he's climbing on the ladder and going for those high stake games and how it affects him. And I thought to myself, I know that anxiety affects me when I'm playing. It has to be affecting you. And if it's affecting the top players in the game, the difference has to be how we are dealing with this anxiety and how we're letting it affect our gameplay. So I want to break that topic down just a little bit for you. So one thing that he had mentioned was that when he's playing on ladder, this is Toricon, whenever he's playing on ladder, he feels like he's treading water, just kind of hanging out, waiting for those high stake games. He'll win a couple 2-cube games, retreat on some 1 or 2 cube games, no big deal. But really when the stakes are high, that is whenever he's going all in mental energy. And that's important. So I know for me, I've got an Apple Watch here. And there will be times where I have an 8-cuber or I'm trying to reach a certain point in the ladder. Maybe it's the win into infinite or something. And my watch will tell me my heart rate is going up. It's kind of amazing that it specifically tells me like my anxiety is high at this point. So how do we deal with that? It's a really good question. The best way I think to deal with it, and this was kind of brought up throughout the podcast as well, is to utilize the time given to you. Brendan was talking about how he actually doesn't do that well. He thinks that he, sets his move in and clicks next turn really quickly instead of utilizing all that time. I know that whenever I watch Lambie's stream, I'm watching him go through plays over and over. So he'll put some cards out on the board and then he'll undo all actions. He'll put cards in a different spot, undo all actions. The whole time he's talking to himself and the chat about how does he lose, right? And there are times that you can overthink things. But really what he's doing there is he's just really thinking about everything. I don't know how many times I've had a limbo on the board and I forgot that it is not the last turn of the game. Turn 6, but there's actually a turn 7 here. So taking the time on the ladder and just calming down is a big point that I think will help improve your game. Later on, we're going to see a game where I'm going to talk about some anxiety I had because of the situation I was in. And I can only imagine that situation could be the same if you were going for a high rank position that you've never been at before, or you're aiming for a tournament. So let's kind of break that down in my gameplay and just talk about how anxiety kind of affects us and some ways to deal with it. Before we get started, I'm going to quickly break down my 12 best tips for your climb to infinite, and that is number 1, know your big plays. Number 2, snap on turns 2, 3, and 4. Number 3, don't bet on drawing into a better hand. Number 4, retreat when your opponent snaps on turn 5. 5, don't snap on turn 5. 6, don't stick around just because you snap. 7, retreat if you suspect your opponent has the one card that beats you. 8, be patient and click retreat later. 9, retreat often and revel in your 4 and 8 cube wins. 10, players do not bluff on snaps. 11, before you play your setup piece, make sure you snap. And 12, test your decks in conquest mode. Let's move on to the deck. Before we get started with the gameplay, just want to very quickly break down my Big Dumb Idiots deck, just in case you didn't see the last video, so that way you understand what my play lines are and what I'm looking to do. Early setup is going to be cards like Armor and Cosmo, allowing me to protect my mid-game plays, being maybe a Warpath or Tuma, leading into my Big Dumb Idiots with Ronin, Blob, Scar, and Destroyer. Simple game plan for a simple deck. All right, this first game I have for you here is not a good performance by me. Let me build the situation for you just a little bit. I had my best friend over and he was actually sitting in a chair right here behind me. He likes to watch me play every once in a while. and I get to like pretend that I'm a streamer, which is fun. But I think that happened is I let that get to my head. The games prior to this, I was actually doing pretty good. I was winning the games. I was doing well, following my tips and whatnot. But in this game in particular, I got tunnel vision, and it really got to my head about like needing to win this game. And I think it was, a little bit of that anxiety we were talking about having my friend here and me kind of talking it up. I really talked about how I was performing well in this game and how I was drawing and like how I'm going to win. And it really started right here. So my opening hand looked pretty solid. I had a good turn 4 play, which is what the deck wants to do. And then I drew into armor, which is even better. I plan on playing my warpath there. I've got a pretty good curve building. And I just feel very confident at this point. I drew my armor, and my opponent played a Deadpool. I have priority now. And with the time theater, I now know I can put that armor onto the Deadpool. So this, I think the beginning of the game actually went pretty well for me. I snapped early. My opponent thinks that I've already dropped my armor out, so I'm going to play the armor on top of their Deadpool and snap before they get to see it. And that's a really good play. I'm snapping on those turns 2, 3, and 4. All of the things are going pretty well right now. But this is where it actually kind of starts to fall off for me. So I end up, I think I'm in a pretty commanding position. I get the snap down, but I think I'm starting to lose focus of what my game plan is. I got so focused on like stopping my opponent from doing the thing that I just kind of forgot like how I win. And that's really important. You need to remember what your game plan is and make sure you're executing it and reading the signs when those things don't happen. So we see our turn 3 play here come out. It's Nico Minaru. I'm going to end up destroying the second Deadpool. Still not a big deal for me, but they're starting to do the things they want to do. They end up playing 3 cards this turn and drawing 2 cards. That's pretty powerful. This Forge, I can only imagine, is going to go on to a Deadpool. So, I've got this Cosmo that I just drew, and this is where I really think it goes downhill. All right. So I drew this Cosmo, and I'm so confident in myself, right? I'm playing against what looks like a destroy deck, and I've just locked down every single lane. How could they win? It's impossible. It's impossible to win with a destroy deck if it's if I've got every single lane locked down. I've got priority. This looks fantastic for me. But what I forgot here is this deck has to play stats on turns 4, 5, and 6. That's how it wins. And instead of playing stats, I end up playing a 3-power dog. And I really lost focus of what I was doing here. So another thing going on here too, I slammed down the Cosmo. The only big power card I've got in my hand right now is a Warpath. And I've just taken away 5 points of power from that Warpath. So this really doesn't look good. Like, I forgot how I'm going to win. I blocked this play here, but as you can see, he's got 7 power compared to my 3 power in that lane. So my options are kind of lackluster. You see, I just draw Scar here. I have no way to reduce the cost of Scar. So I end up playing a Gladiator. I was kind of trying to figure out where I wanted to play it to. And I just, ended up playing it in the middle. That was kind of a bad play too. At this point, I had kind of realized that I messed up. And I was starting to get a bit of that anxiety that we're talking about. So I played in the middle. My idea was that I was going to try to clog up the opponent some. Again, I'm not really certain where I was going with that. But as you can see here, I didn't end up clogging him. And all I did was give him 5 extra points of power. So now I'm in this position going into turn 6 where my opponent has 2 lanes already. He's got all 3 lanes. And I'm going to, instead of retreating, I'm going to try to play it out. There's really no way to win with my hand right now. I could put a couple points in 2 lanes, and if they completely mess up, then I will lose. Another one here is one of my tips of retreating when an opponent snaps on turn 5. I should have read that retreat, but again, had my best friend sitting right behind me, and I wanted to be cool. I wanted to win this game because I was talking about how well I was doing. I locked down all these lanes. There's no way my opponent can win. And that just isn't the truth. Sometimes you got to read the cards and realize that the truth is worse. Look at this. I ended up putting 8 points of power on the board on turn 6 and thinking that's going to win it for me somehow. I'm really not certain where I was going with this. And this is for 8 cubes. So just kind of think about that. I'm a top 500 player. There's players that are way better than me that make mistakes. But the way that we make mistakes, like, we really have to think about how we're doing this, because this game points out to me that I had no way to win this game, and it was going to be bad. I got really upset with this game. I ended up, going into my next game just a little bit frustrated and angry, and it was really a poor performance. If you play like a robot, like Lambie says, and you always follow your tips, then this kind of stuff will not happen. Don't get overly focused on what you're doing. Don't let your anxiety get to you. Don't think that you have to stay in a game just because you snap. And it's really going to pay off for you and help you get to your goals in the future. Right. The next one is quite a bit better than that one. Let's get to it. All right. This next game is pretty much the exact opposite of what happened to me in the last game. I'm not exactly certain what happened with my opponent, but I think there's some strong plays that I make, some good talking points. But they maybe got a little bit of tunnel vision themselves and couldn't quite figure out how it was they were going to win the game. So I guess I kind of gave away the ending. But this looks perfect for my deck. I've got an early armor with Wakanda location. Tuma loves both of those things. So I could have snapped on turn 1. I don't generally snap on turn 1. I like to snap on turns 2, 3, and 4 because I like to get a little bit more information from my opponent if I can. But that's what I like to do. On turn 2, I do go ahead and snap. My opponent didn't play anything crazy on turn 1, not maybe a nebula somewhere that's forcing me to play. So I like my chances here. I'm going to bet into my good hands, which I believe I have right now, and make my opponent pay to see them. So things are looking very solid for me right now. I'm going to end up playing my 0 and my Maximus here to start getting points on the board. That way I can continue pushing forward with my game plan. So I'm already kind of thinking things out a little bit. I could possibly do a Quake with Luke's bar. That way I could move that location, move that onto maybe Wakanda or something. But it's all looking pretty good for me right now. My opponent ends up playing Magic under the Luke's bar, which kind of messes up my Quake plan, but that's not too bad because I've already got these other 2 lanes pretty locked down. I don't even care about that lane. I don't plan on playing into it at all. So on turn 4 here, I'm easily able to slam my Atuma down. I'm going up quite a bit of points in here. And this is the point where I think my opponent really should have probably been considering retreating. So my turn 4, I add 10 points to the field. My opponent, on the other hand, plays a Wolfsbane and ends up adding 3. That's a pretty big difference. There's 5 total points for them on the board, and I have 22. So on my turn 5 here, I'm easily able to play a Warpath out. Both of these lanes are protected for me, so I'm not scared of Shang-Chi at all. I'm not really, I don't know how my opponent wins right here. They use their turn 5, on the other hand, to put out a pretty big threat, but it's just not in the same league, right? So we get a Devil Dinosaur showing up here, which ends up actually tying that location, but I still have 2 more turns to play through. I have so many points in hand. I'm pretty sure I'm going to win this thing. And I think that my opponent really hadn't considered what their end goal was. Putting out the blob here is going to get pretty big for me, adding quite a bit of points on the board and taking over this far right location for me. I don't, this is one of those situations where you really have to consider how many points it is that you're able to output. So at this point on my far right location, I go up to, I believe it's 29. Yep, 29 points there. And I've got 19 in the left location. So if I wanted to, I could probably pretty easily flip the middle location, but my opponent sticks it out. Here, remember we talked about the Lambie thing earlier. I went ahead and I made a play, then I reconsidered it. I wanted to put a little extra points over here on the left because it was a little bit closer. But what my opponent ends up doing is they play an Iron Man, which is really kind of crazy to me. I don't know if they miscalculated or what, but the Iron Man play here takes that lane up to 26. That lane was at 29 before, so they weren't going to win that no matter what they did. Again, not really certain what their goal was. I did the correct things by snapping early and having a game plan, but I just wanted to kind of point out that frustration happens, no matter who you are. Make sure that we're just accounting for it. We're knowing when we should be snapping, when we should be retreating, especially when we should be retreating, and not letting outside entities or where we are at in the game focus on the game you're playing. Make sure that that is the only thing you're thinking about, what's in front of you. And I guarantee that if you can do that successfully, or when you're getting a little frustrated or the anxiety starts building, you're walking away, your ranks will go up faster. So take these into consideration. I've enjoyed talking about this topic. Make sure you listen to that snapshot episode because it's fantastic. And Corey Khan just gives a masterclass on a whole bunch of topics. But I thought it was very inspirational, and I needed to make sure that I shared that information with you today. All right, thank you again for joining me for another episode of Snap Tactics with GunnyT. I hope that you got something out of this. I know that I did. I love bringing these to you guys. Make sure you subscribe. Give me some comments if this is something that's helping you, or if there's a topic that you'd like me to try to cover. This is something I'm going to continue doing because this kind of critical thinking helps me grow as a player just as much as I'm hoping that it helps you. All right, until next time, GunnyT out.